each in their own way are kind of a head scratcher. But as we get into today's teaching from Jesus about an unfaithful and unreliable steward, it not only is the parable hard to understand, all of the commentaries and explanations are hard to understand. Ultimately, Jesus is making a comparison to a steward, which he does that a lot. He would think of our role in relationship to God to be in charge of, for God, God's stuff, that we are God's stewards, mayordomos. We're the ones who take care of his estate and his household here on earth, as long as we remember that it is God's. But this is a major twist, because this isn't just a pretty bad steward. It's a bad steward who's going to get himself fired and who comes up with a scheme on how to be well received after he's fired. And even though the scheme involves ripping off the landowner, his master, the master in the end commends him for his ingenuity. And Jesus says, kind of to the point of his parable, why don't y'all care as much about the things of God as this guy does about having a comfortable place to lay his head and a secure lifestyle, right? Mammon. So y'all probably knew the parable, so I wasted your time outlining it again. But I just did that to make sure that you understood that I wasn't just me. This parable really doesn't make sense, right? That in what way is God like a selfish and cheating landowner? In what way are we being commended for being like an unjust steward who not only has been taking money on the side and got in trouble, but now he's just giving out his master's possessions? Like, how does this make sense? And it finally dawned on me that if we're talking about God's gifts, the question is, what are the things that the children of light are interested in? Because we all seem to be interested in a comfortable place to sleep and power and security. So what is it, other than this money stuff, that the children of God would care about? And if that is love and peace and patience and kindness, it made me think how incredibly stingy we can be with the things that God gives away so freely. I remember a story that Father Ron Roldheiser tells from when he was a young priest, and he was staying in the rectory with an older saintly oblate, and he was asking him, like, if he had anything he would do differently in his priesthood, anything he regretted, fully expecting this man of holiness and integrity would be like, nope, no regrets at all, right? And he said, no, I do. I have one very big regret. I wish I had been easier on the people. I wish I had been more generous with God's grace and God's mercy and God's forgiveness. And it makes me wonder sometimes. I've come to that place in my priesthood where I'm much more willing to risk giving away too much of God's, figuring that he can't get too mad at me for being too lavish with his gifts, with his grace, with his kindness, with his forgiveness, that his sacraments are poured out freely, and maybe we're ready for them, and maybe he'll get us ready later, that his love is poured out freely, that we're welcome at his table, and that is a risk sometimes I take, right? Sometimes I say, wow, I'm not exactly sure I was supposed to do that. I'm not positive that's going to work out. I don't know for sure that was the right plan. But I've decided that enough of these people who've been blessed by God, because I didn't get stingy with his grace, Maybe some of them will intercede for me and my mistakes when I'm ready to enter into heaven. I think what Jesus is suggesting is that we can be more generous with his stuff. This steward, he had no problem giving away his master's stuff. At the end of the day, he realized it was his master's, not his. And the master wasn't at all upset about it. Now, that's where parables are always fun, right? You look at the place where they make the least sense, and that's where Jesus is teaching about God. No master in the history of masters would have told his chief steward, you did a great thing, wasting all my money and giving it away, rewriting all my contracts before you left. Thank you. No, nobody would say that. They would get mad. They would get him put in jail. They would send him to tax prison, debtor's prison. No, who does that? God does that. God is generous and is happy when we are generous with his gifts, and we don't have to be stingy. We don't have to spend our energy making sure that our kids who might not be living the lives that we think they should live, that they don't accidentally go up and receive communion. Maybe God can bless them and give them a gift there. Like, we don't have to spend our lives enforcing rules when God wants to pour out his love. And maybe not every time, but maybe that love will transform a life into something lived even better than following rules. A life of salvation and grace and peace. All those things that the children of light desire. May we, like this worthless steward, be incredibly lavish and wasteful with God's gifts. May we never be stingy with what God would freely give away.